Morning. Here's the lecture that I promised to kind of clean up activities, systems, and how the globalization, how the nations interact with each other, I guess is kind of what this lecture will be about. Um, Probably the most important thing to realize on an economic level is that um, there is no independence anymore. There's no independent nation. It's all interactive and interdependent now. And there's actually economic reasons to that. But now goods and services are exchanged, and there's a mixture going to different nations, different systems, different cultures, different ethnic groups. And it's just part of the modern day business, to be honest, especially if you're successful in a large corporation. Um, the good news to this is if I feel like I'm rushing is I to keep it on the free Screencast-O-Matic, which is what I use. And I like the word free. I have to keep this lecture in 15 minutes or less. So if I'm going pretty quick, I apologize. You can pause to do your notes. But I got to keep it going. Just make sure it I keep it. I like free. I like that uh, budgetary amount, if that makes sense. I already said that we're just interconnected now, especially with the trade of goods and services. And so now globalization has occurred. And it really started not being tested over this. It started with Nixon when I think 1971, he did a trip over to China. He got, um, before that, Cold War, no trade, um, evil empire type stuff and communists, got to fight the communists no matter what. And then something happened. We decided to call them a friendly nation and start doing trade with them. And really, we've been developing that the whole world ever since then. So you can blame this on Nixon if you don't like the globalization. What's going on is it's called absolute advantage. And what happens here is the different countries in the world, some just total natural advantages. Some have resources. Saudi Arabia is probably the easiest example. Their oil is really, really clean and it's really close to the surface. And so it's easy for Saudi Arabia to get cheap oil and send it all over the world. Here in the United States, it's really hard for us to get our oil. The oil's underneath rocks and pockets of different kind of soil. And so we have to frack, if that makes sense, go in at an angle and try to get these smaller pockets of oil. And that's expensive. Saudi Arabia has $40 barrel of oil, their cost of getting it out of the ground. We have 60 on, I'm just averages here just so I can talk, dollar barrel oil. They will always have what is called an absolute advantage. They just have nothing they did other than that's where they live. They have natural advantages and resources that Americans here in the United States are never going to have. And so there's an advantage to the world trading with Saudi Arabia to get the cheaper, cleaner oil than to trade with the United States to get more expensive oil that needs refined more in an expensive process. And so there's that advantage that naturally makes humans want to globalize their trade, if that makes sense. Once you decide to seek those advantages, there's also an economic advantage called comparative advantage. And this is where I want to um, get the oil in a more efficient way. I want to use technology in a way that my company that I create is better at getting oil than your company. My distribution system is more efficient and cost less to ship it somewhere than your distribution system. And so when you start comparing trading activities in that way, that is a comparative advantage to where all nations could compete for those kind of advantages. You got to remember there's a difference in these advantages. One, you can't compete because it's just a natural advantage. And one is a comparative advantage where you are always competing. Um, that's the two biggest economic advantages that's going on in the global trade, if that makes sense. There are huge benefits to this trade. If Saudi Arabia, instead of trying to be the master of our, instead of being the jack of all trades, being very average at doing all their things themselves, being very dependent or independent as a nation, and they build and do everything for themselves, they lose out on that absolute advantage, and the world loses out on the absolute advantage to trade that cleaner, cheaper oil. Now they can bring in goods. They can, and it can be services too. Now I think about it, it could be education. It could be all kinds of things coming in because they're a master at getting clean oil or cheap oil, however you want to think of it, and they're sending that out to the world, and they are finding countries that have absolute advantages of their products, and they're getting better products cheaper because it's being made somewhere else and they're shipping it in. So there's a benefit to being a master, in this case drilling oil, and trading for the other needs that your country needs. That's the benefit of globalization on an international level. If you think about it, that will improve not only the country that's trading the oil, in this case Saudi Arabia, but it will improve all the nations it's trading because they're getting the cheaper oil, which is energy for them to produce their goods, and where they can trade with other countries also in a cheaper way, getting this higher quality cheaper. And so everybody, the standard of living for everybody goes up in this situation. Um, Now, that being said, you almost have to. It's not in the notes, not going to be tested. It's newer than the book, obviously, but COVID-19 might change some of our thoughts here, because an independent state that was a jack of all trades, that was truly independent, that didn't need to have interactions with the world, might have been able to skip this virus. This virus is a great case study on how much world interaction we have now. You can just watch it go around and follow the path of these global connections. Um, now, I'm not trying to um, I'm not trying to say the COVID virus is a good thing or anything like that. I'm just saying you can see the interconnectivity now of the global trade of business now because you can just follow this virus going all over the world. It's been really interesting, to be honest, to watch it. I know that I'm not trying to make the virus a positive here, by the way. Trades of balance. When you look at these trades, you have real issues, and I can't remember if we talked about the United States coming into power after World War One. I feel like that was in another lecture I talked about it. But we started the system that started this global trade, started a long time after, well, World War II now, I think. After we won that, we decided we were going to create a system that economic competition was the way we fought each other now. We fought each other for business and trade instead of taking over their resources. We found a way to get their resources by trade or by business. And so we invented the SWIFT system. We started some trade organizations, the World Trade Organization, and we literally built this global trade going on. That created this balance of trade between nations. And if you export more than you import, export being goods that you're sending to other countries, imports being goods that you bring in from other countries, you're going to have a trade surplus. And you should have more money coming in, if that makes sense. Um, if you do the opposite and you have more inputs coming in and you don't create anything the world wants, you're going to create a deficit in your country. Um, and what you'll notice is that United States has gone through these different economic time periods to where we've kind of lost our manufacturing now. We used to be a superpower in this trade exports, I'll say. And now you'll notice we kind of financialized our, went more to services. We do less manufacturing, less goods, and we really just haven't found a way to replace that manufacturing power that we once had. And so you're going to see us have deficits now. And I think I have a screen coming up that will show that. Oh, right here. All right, you're going to notice the objective in a healthy global situation is everybody produces not the same thing, but the same value of stuff. So they can trade in this global economy and get as much goods as they produce, they can bring into their country and get back in that way. Saudi Arabia, if they can produce a lot of oil, can bring a lot of stuff into their country by trading oil, and they can have a fairly wealthy country, standard of living. Um, and and if they manage it right, they should have no trade balance. How much they make is how much they're allowed to bring in. So you're no deficit, no surplus spending, because you got to remember their surplus is somebody else's deficit. So you start causing troubles when you're at something different than zero trade balance. Really, the economic health would dictate you should have a, a zero, if not for with every country, at least when you put all the countries together, you should have a zero balance. You produce what you trade for. If you don't do that, you have to come up with some kind of financialization of trade, which I'm smiling because that's what we do. And now you have to, because you take more in than the world wants from you, you take in too many goods. Now you have to give them IOUs, pieces of paper, say, give us your goods and we'll give you money later. Um, should hurt currency, by the way, should hurt your country in different ways that you can't see as well, which not this lecture, but a different lecture. Um, and so the ideal would be to have a balance in trade. If you notice back in history, we had very small exports and imports balances. Um, and so you'll notice that it was pretty close. We're on the wrong side here. This is 1992. We're on the wrong side, but when you average services and you average uh, goods and you find the two, notice that this trend, this is our, in this case, because it's negative, it's a deficit. You notice through the years, through the 90s, um, this is yearly, by the way. Wait a minute, this might be every 6 months. What is this? I think it's yearly up to 2019, and then it might just be for 6 months. You'll notice that the deficit is going down. Um, Look here at the financial crisis. We stopped spending, so it actually went up here for a year, and now we're kind of back on a path going back down. Um, When you see this purple line here, that means we're borrowing money from the world so we can send that money back to them to get their goods. We're literally trading the world for IOUs. Um, how long, you got to remember, this is an awesome situation. So like you buying goods on a credit card, it's an awesome situation until the credit card company says you've maxed out and we're not doing it anymore. So right now it's working for us. Um, and we've talked about the numbers and how big these numbers are. It would take us um, a long time to trade this back, but to pay this back, excuse me. We know we're not paying it back because we're not even trying to be on a surplus here. We're just growing the